Hello and welcome back to another class of Computing Kids Java 1. My name is Cameron. So today, now that we know a bit about the fundamentals of Greenfoot and Java, today we're going to take a look at a little interesting mechanic that we can make with what we know so far. It's going to be a little launcher that works like this. We're going to press the space bar and our actor is going to shoot out another actor right here. So in this case we have this launcher and it's shooting out these dots. So this is what it's going to look like in the end. So let us then return to our original Greenfoot instance here. Okay, so here we are back with our player from our previous lessons. So first, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create an actor to be the launcher and an actor that is going to be launched. So we're going to create a new subclass. We'll call it launcher. Make it this little castle thing. And we'll create another subclass and call it, let's say, dot. And have it look like this. So now, as usual, we're going to have to add our actor to the world. And to review, to do that, we will go to our world, say actor launcher equals new launcher, parentheses, and then super.add object launcher, and let's say we'll put that at 200, 200. And let's see. So now we have our launcher on our world. So what we're going to have to do first is we're going to have to make it so that our projectiles, so that our dots actually move on the screen. So we're going to head over to our dot, and since, let's say, we want this launcher to launch projectiles to the right, all we're going to have to do is say move 5. And then, whenever our dots are created by the launcher, they will move to the right to give the appearance of being launched from this actor right here. So now that we have our dots moving, we can return to our launcher and actually create them. So we're going to need to use our spacebar or another key to launch our projectiles. So we're going to need an if statement, as with our keyboard input last time. So if greenfoot.isKey down space, make sure we have curly braces on our if statement, and it should look something like this. We are going to get our world, because remember, we're going to need to use our world to add a new actor whenever we press the spacebar. We're going to need to add a dot to the world so that it can be launched. So get world dot add object new dot, and then since we need to add it at the same x and y coordinate as our launcher so that it gives the impression of being launched from that actor, we're going to need to say get x for the x value, which gives us the x location of this actor right here of our launcher, and get y. And now, when we compile it, hit run, when we press the spacebar, we launch our actors. Now we can see already that there's a few problems with this that we'll need to address. First of all, our dots do not disappear when they hit the edge of the screen. So in order to make that the case, we'll have to go back to our dot and use another if statement that says if is at edge. This just checks whether this actor is at the edge of the screen. If is at edge, we're going to get the world again, because remember, we're going to have to use our world in order to add and remove actors. So get world dot remove object, and then we're going to use a new Java keyword called this, and all this refers to is the actor that we're currently inside of. So what this says is that when the dot is at the edge of the world, it is going to remove itself. This is like removing itself from the world. So if we do that again, we can see that our dot gets removed from the world. Now, one final thing we're going to have to take care of here is that we can hold down our spacebar and it just creates an infinite sort of stream of dots, and that's not necessarily what we want. We want it so that we only press the spacebar once and only one dot shoots out per press of the spacebar. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to do a little bit of more coding here. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have some way to check whether our spacebar has already been pressed, because remember, we want it to have it be so we press the spacebar, so we press the spacebar and only one dot shoots out per spacebar press. So if the spacebar has already been pressed, we don't want more dots to shoot out until we press it again. So in order to do that, we're going to need to keep track of whether the spacebar has been pressed or not. So we're going to go outside of our act method and declare what's called a Boolean variable. So we're going to say public Boolean space down. And a Boolean variable is simply a true or false value. So we're creating something here where we can store a true or false value that we're going to use to determine whether our spacebar is pressed down or not. So what we can do with this is we can say that when we press the spacebar, our space down variable gets set to true. So now we know that when we've pressed the spacebar, that it is currently being held down. And furthermore, we want it so that we will only shoot a new dot if our spacebar is not pressed down. So now we can say exclamation point. Remember, this negates whatever comes after it. So if the spacebar is not pressed down, and see these two and symbols here, means that all of this is a single if statement. So if the spacebar is not pressed down and the space key is pressed, that means we're pressing it for the first time, then, only then, will we launch a new dot. But now we need to figure out how we're going to get the space down variable to go back to false once we release the spacebar. And to do that, we're just going to have to reverse the logic that we have here. So we can have another if statement, and we can say if the spacebar is pressed down and the spacebar is not being pressed on the keyboard, this means that we have just released the spacebar, then we will set our space down variable equal to false. So now basically what this says is that if we have not pressed the spacebar down and we now press it, we are going to set our space down variable to true and we're going to launch a new dot. But if our spacebar is already pressed, we are not going to launch a new dot. Our spacebar will only be able to be used to launch another dot again until we have released the spacebar and our space down variable is set to false again. So then we can go back into this if statement. So let's take a look at this in action. So I'm holding down the spacebar right now, and you can see that only one projectile is launched, just like we wanted.